Hi, welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be sharing with you Becca's birth story. And so I know some of you have been waiting for it. Here it is, I'm finally doing it. And so if you like this kind of content and other like homeschool and lifestyle content, please remember to subscribe and let's get into it. Okay, so hopefully she'll be good. She's a pretty good baby, but I'm first going to talk about labor and delivery, and then we'll talk a little bit about Becca. So for labor and delivery, I had a scheduled induction date. For those who are new around here, this is my 6th child, and so the first one was born in Utah, and I had an epidural. I was planning to go natural, but my labor was super long, and I just was very, very sick. And so I had like full-blown epidural with him. And then my next 3 were born in Connecticut. We were at graduate school, and they did something there called a walking epidural at the hospital we were at. And so they, basically by the time you push, the epidural has worn off. Not completely, but almost completely. So you're feeling basically everything. And then with my last baby, my 5th baby was a surprise. So there's a 5-year gap between my oldest 4 and then my 5th one. I wanted to just have him naturally. Like, I was still induced. I've been induced with 4 of my 6 kids because I just don't dilate, and I've gone like to 41 weeks and still nothing is happening. So I've been induced with the last 5. My first one's the only one I actually went into labor with. And so I wanted to not have an epidural with him. That was my goal and all these things. So I read a lot of hypnobirthing books, and we did. I was induced. It was about 12 hours from start to finish because I was group B positive with him and had a penicillin first. And then they started a higher dose of Pitocin, and about 9 hours after that is when he was born. And so then I was like, okay, we've done this once, we're gonna do it again. And that's what happened. That was the plan. And that's what I had her naturally. And honestly, the weeks and months and days, all of it leading up to it, I was not as prepared for it. I feel like I had my 5th child is just, they're 19 months apart almost exactly. And I just had his labor and delivery so fresh in my mind, and it was still like, I just don't want to do this again. It's exhausting, especially because I'm just not dilated at all, and it just is a long day. And I just wanted one of those stories where I just like come into the hospital and I'm 8 centimeters and the baby's born a few hours later. That was always like the dream for me, just because my labors are just so long. And so anyways, I just mentally did not feel like I was in a very good headspace for having her. So then, we have the date that we're going to be induced, and she's just staring at my shirt. And so then, with my 5th child, because we live back in Utah again. So the last 2 have been born in Utah. The hospital called at 5 o'clock in the morning, and we're like, can you be here by 6? And we're like, yes. So we went in at 6 o'clock in the morning. So that's kind of what we were expecting. I had just seen my midwife the day before, and she said that it was so busy. Like within those 2 days, they had delivered 23 babies. Like it was crazy busy. And so she didn't know. She was hoping they'd still be able to get me in the morning, but she just honestly didn't know. And so they didn't call in the morning. By mid-morning, I texted my midwife and was like, do you even know what the plan is, just so we can kind of know? Like, my mom had come the night before. She was already here to help watch kids and everything. So we were just kind of hanging out. We felt like anxious and ready to be done. So it was kind of like you feel like you couldn't do anything. I tried to keep myself busy just doing stuff around the house, but I had already prepared so many things. I didn't really have much to do. And so, it's just this very long day of like, okay. And my midwife called at 2 o'clock, and we thought it was the hospital because I think she was calling from the hospital. And so then we were all like excited, yay. And she's like, sorry, they probably won't be able to get you in until maybe after 5, or 6 tonight. And so we're like, okay. But then that comes and goes, and they still haven't called or anything. And it's just very different from my last baby, or even the other ones I was induced. Like we were pushed off before with one of my other kids because the hospital was so busy, but we were still in by like lunchtime. And this wasn't that, right? We're not even in by dinner time. And so at like 8 or 8:30 that night, I texted my midwife again, and she's like, they still haven't called you? And she was kind of mad. So she calls them, and then they call me a little after 9 o'clock, I think, that night, and ask if I could be there by 10 o'clock. You know, we only live like 20 minutes away from the hospital, 15, 20. And so we're like, yes. I wasn't going to risk coming in the next morning because I could have just waited till the next morning and tried to get some sleep. You know, it's still hard for me to sleep when I'm like super anxious about it. But I was like, I might get pushed off again if they have a whole bunch more people come in, like women come in to deliver babies. And so we went in at 10 o'clock that night, and by 10:30 they had started Pitocin. So they put the first IV in. Usually they put it on my right hand, which is okay. It's not, I don't love it, like in my forearm right here. And so I was like, well, maybe we should try the left, just because then it's not my dominant hand when I'm trying to do so many things. But then my vein popped, so that was great. I already hate needles. Like drawing blood was so hard for me when I was younger. I'd almost pass out every time, and I've gotten to a point where I can actually like have them, you know, take blood for tests. But like IVs are the worst. I just hate them so much, and I've had so many in my life. And so they popped the vein. She's playing with it. I'm just like, she's gonna have to do it again. I just knew it. And I had already like been talking to everyone, trying to keep my mind off of it. So then she had to do it again, and it wasn't horrible. It wasn't my favorite. I was glad when it was done and it was working properly, but it did have to still go in this arm because the vein on this side popped. So actually I had a huge bruise on my arm for several weeks because of that. But anyway, so they finally get it all in. You know, they say like within an hour, they like to have Pitocin started by the time, you know, within an hour of you being in the hospital. So by 10:30 it is started, and we're actually in like the natural birthing room. They didn't have it available last time. And I honestly don't use a lot of this stuff just because I don't really like to move very much when I'm in labor. But they have a tub, so you can't deliver in it, but you could labor in it. You know, they have all the different like squatting bars and tons of exercise ball, like the bounce balls, all the different things like that. Like you can get in the shower, you know, there's a lot of more resources, and they only have like one of those bigger remodeled rooms. And then another nice thing that I have never had happen before, I've heard people talk about this, and they did mention it last time, is the wireless monitor. You know, so when you are induced especially, they monitor constantly just to make sure everything's good, because, you know, there's contractions can be a lot more intense or, you know, spaced a little bit weird, you know, and the heartbeat, like they have to monitor everything. And so usually you're hooked up to a machine, and if you have to go to the bathroom or want to get up and just walk around, you have to unplug yourself. And so it's a little bit less freedom that way, because obviously they don't want you unplugged for a super long time. So they had the wireless one available. So it goes like over your belly button, basically. I felt kind of like Iron Man, except on my belly button. And so it's just like these little sensors that go around, and then they put the Wi-Fi thing in the middle, and it sends all the data back. So then you don't have to unhook all those things. You just can get up and go. So it was super nice, actually. So if you guys have that available, especially if you want to do natural childbirth, I think it's super nice because you just don't have to worry about extra cords, especially when you're being induced, because you're already having to worry about an IV. So anyway, that was a really nice thing. So, you know, they start that, and by I think midnight, my husband is trying to sleep. You know, those couches there are not sleepable. They're like so uncomfortable. And every time he moves, I can hear him. So I'm like, it has to be waking him up every single time, it seems like. But anyways, so sorry if I start sweating. I'm holding her. I'm nursing, not nursing right now, but you know, when I'm nursing, I sweat more. And then this room is so hot in the summertime. There's like one air vent over here. So I'm like, let's scoot closer. But anyways, so sorry if it's like streaming down my face because I already feel really warm. But so he is trying to sleep, and I tried to sleep as well. you know, I was dozing in and out because the contractions weren't anything super crazy yet. And I wasn't group B positive with her, which my last 3 before her I was. So I didn't have to have penicillin. They were just able to start right away and kind of get up. They'd increase the Pitocin every hour or 2 or whatever. And I have, I don't know, I think I can remember all the timestamps. My husband was good at sending my friend in Texas all the timestamps. And so I actually have, once he was awake in the morning, so it was like right before 6 that they, I think, checked me again, and I was barely at, just barely over a 1, which is what I was when they started. So I really, not too much had changed. There had been a little bit of progress, but it was basically like 5 hours, right, on Pitocin and not too much going on. So they were trying to like decide what they wanted to do and have the midwife come in. Are you gonna get mad? So she could break my water and all that kind of stuff. And so she did get, she got there, I think around 7 or just after 7. And that's when they broke she broke my water. And by that point, so just about an hour later, she's like, oh, you're probably a really good 3 right now. Oh, did you have a bubble? Are you gonna spit up on me? Because that would be nice. And so, you know, they broke my water, and then I think it was like 8:20. So an hour and 20 minutes later, I was at a 5.5. And with my 2nd, 3rd, and 4th child, but I had epidurals with them, but I could still feel a lot of what was going on. That by the time I got to a 6, I would have a baby within 10 minutes. And so, you know, my midwife was still in the hospital, and she likes to labor the last hour or 2 with you. And so she's like, when she gets to 5, let me know. So they called her up. And at that point I was already having a good amount of pressure. And so I was like, oh my gosh, is this baby gonna come before she even gets up here? And no, the answer is no, she was not. I wish she would have, but, and so we just waited for her to come up, and she had a student with her as well. And so when they finally got up there, I wasn't feeling as much pressure and stuff. So I was like, okay, maybe it's not close yet. And she comes in, and I'm just like, I think we're getting closer. And she's like, you're so calm, which is so funny. She's like, you're just like so quiet. Apparently she was telling the student that too, that I'm just very quiet, because a lot of the other, you know, she does obviously lots and lots of natural childbirth. And she's like, most of them aren't this calm. They're not this quiet. She's just very easy, which I'm like, that's good, because inside I'm dying. But so yeah, she gets there and they start massaging my legs. I do not like to be touched when I am in pain. I'm just like, stay away from me. But my last pregnancy, her and my husband massaged my legs, and I didn't mind that. And my favorite position to like labor in, I don't like to walk around. It actually makes me feel sick. It makes everything hurt worse. Is I think it's called throne position, because that's kind of what it looks like. They can lower the legs of the bed, so it kind of like your feet rest on the bottom of the bed, and then the back part raises up like you're sitting in a throne, like a queen sort of situation. And that is the most comfortable for me. And then basically, you know, you scoot off the little edge of the seat, and then you can just have the baby that way, sort of like seated, slightly leaning back. And that worked really well with my last baby. And so that's what I was doing this time. So they just sit there and they massage my legs, and, you know, breathing through contractions. I'm like, feel like I am on another plane at this point. Like, just, I'm hearing everything that's going on around me, but I'm so distant from it and so focused, trying to survive through all the contractions and labor. And my husband always feels useless, just because I just don't like people doing things for me. It makes it worse. And so he just kind of stands by my side until I need something, which usually isn't until I need to push, you know, but he would give me ice cubes every once in a while so my mouth wasn't dry. And at one point, the last like 10 minutes of labor, I was sweating like crazy. So they grabbed a fan, and he had to help put the batteries in the fan because the midwife couldn't figure it out. And so the fan was blowing right in my face, and that was super helpful. So he did some things, you know, any little thing he could do to help. But I just don't need a whole lot of help. It's just not how I function when I'm in pain. So that's kind of where we, you know, kept progressing. And then by like at 10 o'clock, I felt a lot of pressure again. And I still, so something you need to know, like my last two babies were my cervix was posterior, which means it's sitting behind the baby's head. And I don't know how much this impacted all these things that I'm feeling here. My last one, not so much. From basically when I hit a 6, it was like 45 minutes before I delivered him. With her, it's gonna end up being about 2 hours before I actually deliver, you know, from when I was a 5.5 to having her. And so I'm, you know, but feeling all this pressure and everything. So their head is not actually helping dilate my cervix because it's sitting in front of it. Like the midwife has to reach behind their head to find my cervix, which, yeah, it's not comfortable at all to have to check anything. And I think with my last baby, my cervix adjusted faster and then his head was where it needed to be. With her, even when I was at an 8, so at 10 o'clock, I was like, I'm feeling lots of pressure and get ready. I'm like, no, I don't think it's time yet. Like, I'm just not feeling like it's time. And the student checked me and the midwife checked me and she's like, but she still had to kind of reach back, not as far, but still some. She's like, oh, you're like at a good 8, so we're getting really close. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm dying here. And so annoyed that she's just not coming out. Again, I think I kept feeling so much pressure because her head was right there, but she wasn't actually pushing on my cervix. So it was like, I feel like it's time to have her, but my cervix isn't dilated. So anyway, so they all gowned up, you know, they pushed the call buttons. So this was the most ready anybody's been since my first baby for me to have a baby, because usually they're just flying out. So they're just catching them on the fly. But they all, you know, they gown up and she's like, don't worry, we prefer it to be this way for us to be ready and waiting for you and not all of a sudden just having a baby. So it was about 30 minutes later that she would actually be born. And so I'm just breathing through contractions and praying and singing church songs in my head, like every little thing to just help me to focus. You know, the midwife keeps helping me, like, relax your shoulders. I'm not very good at relaxing. Relax your shoulders, like just breathe. And she was so great. I just like the little prompts because it helps me remember what I'm supposed to be doing. And so, you know, we get through all that. And then my husband knows with my last, you know, with all the last 5 that I've been able to feel everything when it comes time to pushing. He knows what it sounds like when I'm ready to have a baby, because I don't make any noise really until it is time for that baby to fly out the door. And so as soon as I make a noise, he's like, oh, it's baby time. Like, this baby's coming now. And that's basically what happened. Like, I made the noise and I pushed once. And again, with her, it was, sorry, she just dropped her binky. The labor, like the pushing was still a little bit harder even like with her. Usually it's my body just takes completely over and I have absolutely no control of it. With her, like there was some of that, but not nearly as much as there normally is. So that was weird for me that was different. And so I like push a little bit at the beginning as I'm starting to feel like, oh, she's coming. And then could feel her, like she's just sitting there. Like she hasn't even crowned yet, but she's just sitting there about ready to come out. And so on the next contraction, I'm like, she's coming, she's out because I'm done with this. And she did. She came right out. It was, again, still a little bit harder for me, but the midwife was like, it was super fast, you know, but from my perspective, from feeling my other labors, it was still a little bit different. But yeah, she came out and her cord was a little bit short. So they had to wait until, you know, cause we did delayed cord clamping. So they waited a few minutes. And so she sat a little bit lower on my abdomen because that's as far as they could put her, with my placenta still being attached and everything. And then once they clamped everything and got my placenta out, then they were able to move her up closer to me. But yeah, so that's basically the story. And my husband says it's like night and day difference once I give birth, because I am totally basically out of it. You know, like I'm just in a zone, and everybody can tell that I am just like in a different place. And then as soon as she was born, I like snap out of it. And all of a sudden it's like I'm hypnotized and then just wake up and I'm talking and I'm laughing and all the things that I just wasn't doing a minute before. And he's like, it is the strangest thing when that happens, because it's just like I'm a totally different person all of a sudden. So I was glad to be done, for sure. It was about 12 hours. Like she was born about 10:30 in the morning. So from the time they started till finish, it was about 12 hours. This is a certain amount of time that requires math. And so I was glad. I was like, I felt great that it was finally done. I didn't tear. I haven't torn with my last two, and I did with the previous four. Like my first four I tore. And I think the previous three was because they came so fast, like so fast. I think one of the reasons I tore with them is because my body didn't have time to adjust, because she was 9 pounds, and my last baby, my fifth one, I didn't tear on. He was 8.5, I think. But the fourth one was she was 8.6, I think. And I tore with her, but she put her hand by her face. And then the other two were bigger. They were over 9 pounds and stuff. So, you know, I tore with them, but again, she was around that range and I didn't tear with her. So I think it was because my body just had a little bit more time to adjust and all that kind of stuff. So that was nice. And then, yeah, we chilled out in the delivery room for a little while. I am always just concerned about food. And that's all I ever want to do after I give birth is, what do I get to eat? So we made sure I got some food. And then, yeah, we went into our room afterwards in mother baby. My kids came later in the day to see her. That was something nice about her being born in the morning. They could come see her a little bit later in the day. And we only stayed for about 24 hours. Right after her 24-hour checkup, the next day we came home. And that's with my last few babies. I've gotten out of the hospital really quick. And the nurses always have to tell me to take it easy, but then they're also like, we can see that you feel fine. And so I'm always having to, my husband's like, okay, be careful. Like he told the nurses, like, she just jumped out of this bed and you told her not to jump out of the bed. I was like, I didn't jump out of the bed. Anyway, and so just all these things where I just feel so good not being pregnant that I am just ready to go. And so I wasn't very sore or anything like that. You know, the worst of it is having to have your milk come in, and then just the massages. Those are super fun. But other than that, like, it all went pretty smoothly. You know, yeah, it was very mentally challenging and physically challenging, but I was grateful that it all went smoothly and we were both healthy, and all that was really good. Okay, so the last thing I was going to mention was just a few things about her. Sorry, she's resting on the table now. She's heavy. And I'm already so sweaty in this very hot room. And so if my cheeks are like super flushed, it's not because I put an excess amount of blush on this morning. But so her name is Becca Ruth. Her middle name is after my husband's great grandmother, and she had a very strong testimony of Christ. And so that was one of the reasons we picked that name. She did a lot of great missionary work and all that. And so her middle name is Ruth, and then her first name is Becca. So last year, my husband had a student who was also his TA, and she died of a very aggressive form of cancer. But one of the things on her bucket list was to go out to lunch with my husband. Like, her and her husband went out to lunch with my husband, and that was like, he was the last person she talked to, because after that she slipped into a coma and died a couple days later, and she was very sick. And so anyways, it was last summer before I was even pregnant. I knew her name was gonna be Becca. I knew we were gonna have another baby. I knew it was gonna be a girl and her name was gonna be Becca. And so this girl's name was Rebecca, but we just call her Becca because somehow all of our kids ended up with 5-letter names. The first 4 was purely by accident, and then the 5th one we did intentionally, and now we have her. And so I already knew last summer that's what her name was gonna be. And again, a very strong Christian girl, a college student that I never met but just deeply admire. So that is who she is named after. And I said already that she was 9 pounds when she was born. She was 20 inches. But at her like a few day checkup, she was already back past her birth weight. And then at 2 weeks, she was 10 pounds, 3 ounces and 22 inches long. So she's big. She's getting very big, and it's been almost 2 weeks since her 2-week checkup. So like she's 4 weeks today, but her 2-week checkup was closer to like 2.5 weeks. So she's probably a lot bigger than that now as well. She's just growing, which is good. And she sleeps super well. For any of you that were around when I talked about my last baby, he was very, very hard. He was a very grumpy baby, just so fussy, just miserable all the time. I couldn't basically put him down. He would just wake up and it'd take forever to even get him to go to sleep. He'd just cry. And even if he had just been fed, he nursed not so great either. Like he would nurse, but he was just restless. And it was just really hard. He was the hardest baby that I had. And she is probably the easiest one out of all of my kids because they all come with their own little temperaments. And she has definitely been the easiest. I usually feed her around 7 at night, and she'll wake up around midnight or 1 to eat, and then again at like 4. And then I get out of bed usually around 6:30 or 7, and she'll eat around that time. So only really twice when I'm asleep does she wake up, which again is just leaps and bounds different than my last baby or even most of my other kids. Like she has just slept so well. Even in the hospital, I noticed it. That first night, I'm like, I actually slept in the hospital because she was such a good baby. So anyways, that's some about her. I don't know if there was anything else I wanted to say, but so far she's doing great. My toddler loves her, which is weird because all my other kids, they're pretty close in age as well, my first 4, and they were never really interested in the next baby. And he is so interested in her. When I come down in the morning, he hears the door open and he's like, baby! And then I don't have the baby and he's like looking around, wondering where she is. And he's just very, very interested in everything that's going on. He's very helpful, sometimes too much helpful. And so yes, and he had a cold not too long after she was born. Gratefully, it didn't seem like anybody else got it. And so then we had to keep him away from her. And so that was a little bit hard for him and frustrating. And he has, he was sick. And then I think adjusting to her and not as much mom time has been a little bit hard for him as well. But we're, trying to make it through. It's nice to have older kids to help out either with her or with him so I can spend time with either one of them. But so far it has been going really well. I feel really good. I've started a little bit of light exercise, mostly just walking and some deep core exercises, just very basic things to help strengthen my core back up. I was recording too long. At 30 minutes, it shuts me off. So I won't stay much longer. But yes, I'm just grateful to not be pregnant. And like, I just am so excited to be able to eat and not feel sick and to move and all the things. Like, it's just great. I just could have leaped out of that bed right after I had her because I felt so good. Like night and day difference from being pregnant to not in a matter of minutes. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I have several other like labor delivery videos, just different tips or different things that I've experienced through 6 different births and having different hospital experiences and all that kind of stuff. And so if you do have questions that you would like me to answer in any of those videos, put them down in the comments and I'll see where they fit best. And if you enjoyed listening to me rant forever, hopefully you found something to do, please give this video a thumbs up and I will see you next time.